Okay, I'm going to be recording. All right, that was a system-wide.
Kind of Worcester.
All right, we'll let the participant list get a little bit back up and we'll be good.
I guess we're doing a restart, huh, Stephen?
Yeah, I think we can, click back up. I do know that the chat logs did save, so whoever was in there, I did notice that those did go back down to the computer, so that's good.
That's great.
Put my thing on Do Not Disturb for an hour. There we go. Okay, we have 32 people back here, not the 75, but they may have joined other rooms as well. I know everyone got booted. So it wasn't just room 7, guys, so. Yes, Sean, that's correct. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks there, Sean, on the muting. I'm going to keep an eye on that as well. So if we do have any ambient noise, I'll let it go for a little bit just in case somebody was getting ready to speak. But if not, I'll hit mute on it. Now I see it looks like Logan got back in, and we have Alexandra as well from the Guiding Coalition. So that's great.
Okay, there, perfect. There we go. Sorry if you've been hearing those clicks. That was in different chat. I had to mute that. All righty. So we'll go ahead and get our introduction started back up. You know that we did get booted. Just know that if we are getting booted, these mean each section is recorded. And so that means that anything, if you don't want your video recording, obviously turn that off. But anything you put in the chat is captured and was captured previously. So be sure to capture that. We'll also go over a way to include your comments in a more formal way if the chat isn't working for you. So Jed, feel free to go to the next slide. And don't forget, there are other rooms out there as well. So, but we're pretty good at 37. It's like half. And then here are the other rooms that are available for language-specific rooms. I think most people I'm reading in the chat were able to get to the room where they were most comfortable. All right. And so in the participant window, in your view of your camera view, we're going to ask if you want to that you hover over your name and you'll see kind of three little buttons that say more, and you can change your name. Is that correct, what I'm saying there, Jed? I think I may be
There's a
incorrect.
rename button. If you hover over your name, you'll see the word rename.
Yeah, you can rename and add your schools of interest to your name. And so however you want to do that, feel free to, Jed, if you see his, he has kind of parentheses flow analytics on there. But whenever you want to change yours, feel free to add um, what schools you feel you're speaking on behalf of, or what your interests are. And if you have to use abbreviations, they'll do best to decipher it. But what that does also is kind of in the chat, it also allows us to, or the district to track sort of which community that is that comment or that solution is coming from. So in this session between me, Jed, Logan, and others who have been part of the Southeast Guiding Coalition, there's going to be a few opportunities for you to, or definitely the whole night, to ask questions. Hopefully get answers to some of those questions. We can't promise you that, we have all the answers, and more than likely some of those answers we will not have, as I'm a facilitator and Jed's co-hosting, and Logan is here also participating in the same capacity, but we'll definitely be here to help provide context, but capture your ideas. And that gets shared out with the larger group, with Claire and with the rest of Flow Analytics. So we promise to capture everything in chat and everything that is being recorded, and we get to hear the ideas of others, and listen. Also, don't forget that there is a survey for tonight. It's down here. It's ppsenrollmentbalancing.com /comment. So that's also on the enrollment and program balancing website for PPS. And we will drop a link into the chat, but that is also searchable as well. And if you were here tonight, I'm sure that's the site that you were able to make it here on as well. But those are all ways to record your comments. You can go to the next slide if you like, Jen. So a few agreements here tonight, and I appreciate you all for coming back and understanding. The first agreement that we've adopted through the Southeast Guiding Coalition is speak and listen respectfully. Everyone brings their own view and lived experience, so we ask that you commit to that. We also ask that you share the airtime and chat space so multiple perspectives can be heard. A big one, number 3, is expect non-closure. From tonight, this is open house, and we are one group of many, and we're facilitating, and we aren't the decision makers here. That would be the Southeast Guiding Coalition and the school board and the community. There's a lot of factors there, so no decisions will be made tonight. And the proposal that's being discussed will likely change before the board votes in January, and that's all based on what's the outcomes of the multiple rooms that are happening, just like this one tonight, and your voice being heard. And that's why we facilitate these. The last one is to stay engaged if you're here, and that's obviously you're here tonight at 7 o'clock, so you're definitely engaged, and PPS is committed to continuing to seek feedback and use that feedback throughout the process to best serve the students and families of PPS. Thank you, Jen. So there are two sections here, the Q&A section and the feedback section. You can write for each section, you can write your topic in the chat. If you cannot see the chat or you want to be, recorded on your voice, definitely state your name for the recording and the topic and your schools of interest, which is also in your name if you change that up there. We will call on different schools and topics until we get through everyone who wants to speak. I believe that with 42, we can't, feel free, there should be a, well, I can ask you guys that, or all that. Is there a hand raising option on your screen here, Jed? Do you all see that?
It's in the participants menu. If you open participants, you should see raise hand.
Perfect. So if you can't see that, and feel free to speak up in the chat. And I promise you that our intent here for me, Jed, and Logan is not to overlook anyone, be it chat or on voice. So feel free to speak up there. And with that, Sean did raise his hand. Were you just showing me that it works, or are you okay? Perfect. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. That was awesome. So I did see it, so now I can see it there, and it looks great. All right, Jed, you want to go to the next slide? Okay. So the first thing that we'll start out with, as others said, this does slow down your computer a little bit. So let me talk about this. So just know kind of that our role here tonight is to really moderate conversation that's going to be shared back with the Southeast Guiding Coalition and with the school board. And so we're going to help provide some clarification on questions that you have. But if we definitely don't have the answers, we will be recording those down. Kind of the few key points I wanted to mention is that the Guiding Coalition recommendation on December 17th is what will inform the board of directors about the decision about only the middle schools and elementary schools within the pink box that you saw on the presentation. So that'd be the Harrison, Park, and Kellogg feeders. Now, phase 1 will conclude with a decision by the board in January. It's important to note that for Kellogg, the implementation will be the 2021 school year. So that'll be the most immediate. And implementation for Harrison Park will be for the following school year, 2022. Also worth noting is that any boundary adjustments will not be recommended by this Guiding Coalition until the completion of phase 2 in the spring of 2021. So note that is the most immediate piece there. So with that, Jed, what do you recommend that we kind of start out with first? Or Logan?
So I'm sorry, I was a little distracted there. I guess our room 4 was going down and we need to get that taken off the website there. So
I can continue on this there.
yeah.
So
Do we want to answer the questions that have already been put into the chat?
well, was that you, Logan?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're not going to be able to answer all the questions, obviously, but if Logan, if there are any that speak to you or that you saw that you wanted to speak to, I think that's definitely a good place to start.
I just, I wanted to add that in addition to our phase 1 mandate, sort of in response to Deb's comment earlier in the chat, we also had stated outcome goals that we were attempting to optimize the use of facilities. So making sure that schools are filled to an acceptable capacity, not overfilled or underfilled. Support equitable programming, allowing access to more programs for all students, and minimizing program co-locations. And so that's what's been guiding our discussions as we've been developing feeder patterns for Kellogg and the new Harrison Park Middle School.
That is correct. And if anyone wants to comment or talk about which of those resonate most with you, feel free to unmute yourself if you like and make a comment. Or and if no one has that, then definitely feel free to ask your question to us or to the group here.
I'm not sure that I have a question, more of a comment, and
Sure.
it's very, very concerning to me that we're considering splitting up. I'm an Atkinson parent. I can see Atkinson from my house. We love having the dual immersion. It creates amazing diversity in our school, and it's a neighborhood and a community feel. And breaking that apart, sending kids across Powell, and then rerouting past the new middle school to a different middle school that is very far away, putting a hardship on parents, not allowing the kids to commute themselves in middle school. The walkability, the livability, having friends in their neighborhood that they go to school with it's outrageous to me, quite frankly, and I'm very upset about it. And I know y'all are trying to do the best you can, but it does not make any sense whatsoever.
Thank you for that. And we are recording those comments down also by typing those down in our notes section as well. So we appreciate that comment.
Can I echo that as a Glencoe parent who neighbors the Atkinson families? I feel like Glencoe and Atkinson have almost been sister communities in some ways, and feeding both into Mount Tabor. I feel like our entire kind of larger neighborhood has really been torn apart in this proposal. Atkinson going to Kellogg, Glencoe continuing to go to Mount Tabor, and then the high school kind of split between the two. Again, with the Glencoe and Richmond families, putting, I think, students at risk with transportation issues all the way to Madison in the future. So kind of want to, say that there's a big part of, I think, that community that has been impacted primarily in phase 2 as well for the high school. But I'm not sure at what point the phase 2 proposals wind up getting discussed. I know phase 1 is really what we're focusing on right now. And I want to make sure there's a voice at the table and representation for those communities before things go too far down the road.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Hi, this is Brett. I have an actual question that's kind of related to those points, which is, we heard some really great goals for this, but I didn't hear one at all about keeping students going to schools that are relatively close to them. And so I wonder if that was a consideration at all in terms of how these proposals were put together, in terms of like kids then living in reasonable proximity to the schools they would go to, especially kind of at the high school level.
Yes, I think, all those things in throughout the Southeast Guiding Coalition are things that were considered. Those are, some of in addition to that, so the one was the needing to limit transportation impacts was definitely on there, looking at some things around walkability to schools, reduced, use of transportation, and environmental concerns were brought up as well. And in addition to those themes, the Southeast Guiding Coalition members were, wrestling with a few others as well. And so there were, looking at schools with imbalanced co-located programs are difficult, especially for some smaller neighborhoods, for smaller neighborhood programs. They're also balancing the fact that of schools devoted entirely to a focus option oftentimes or sometimes create inequity of experience, as well as different definitions of what equity means, demographic equity. So defining that. Another, going back to the high school, is the wanting to avoid high school overcrowding, both now and in the future. And then the use of portable classrooms, that was another piece that they were looking at of, how do we reduce our use on that. I see a question here from Ingrid.
Yes, hello. My name is Ingrid McTaggart. I have 2 children at Franklin, 2 children at Mount Tabor, and a child at Atkinson Elementary. I have kids in both the neighborhood and the Spanish dual immersion program. My question is, why is reducing co-located schools a goal. That goal was given to the committee as just a goal they needed to achieve while they were trying to do this balancing. But it seems to me there's no data as to why reducing co-locating is a good idea. All the teachers I've spoken to, all the parents I've spoken to in both neighborhood and immersion programs want co-location. We want both programs in the school. And when I heard the open house earlier this evening, there was a parent from Bridger, there was a parent from Marysville saying there's some tension within the school between, because of, not having an immersion program or not having enough spots in an immersion program. I think the problem that needs to be fixed is that Portland Public School parents are crying out for more immersion programs. That's what parents want. We want every child in Portland Public Schools to be able to be in an immersion program if that's what the family wants. So rather than taking immersion programs and segregating them out at one school by themselves, I think Portland Public School parents would like the option of an immersion program everywhere that kids want it. I mean, I think ideally parents want an immersion program in every single elementary school in Portland. So I think we need to, frankly, scrap this entire plan instead of, taking immersion schools out of the neighborhood schools and segregating them off by themselves. I think you need to look more at asking parents, do you all want immersion programs? I think there's not going to be a tension in Bridger between the neighborhood and the immersion program if everybody gets into immersion that wants to get in. So that's my take, is that the chaos of all this move and boundaries and changing schools, all of that needs to be put on hold until you find out what parents really want. And I think the current plan, I don't know anybody that wants this plan. So that's my take. Thank you for your time listening. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for providing that, and that will be noted and put forth. Thank you. Logan?
I just wanted to mention that we had heard from the PPS head of the DLI programs, Michael Bacon, fairly early on in the coalition process, where he discussed a lot of the pros and cons around having co-located programs. I work in a DLI school, and I have for quite a while. And from personal experience, I can say that having a co-located DLI program in a K-8 middle school is really, really, really difficult. Of course, that does not impact the K-5 in the same way. However, if there's a single strand of any program in a school, it does pose hardship for those teachers because they're the only person teaching their grade level and their subject in the school. So there's nobody for them to collaborate with in building. So that is one of the cons. I'm sure that you're well aware of many of the pros of them being co-located. I've seen a lot of that in the chat, and those definitely exist as well.
And I kind of want to add on to that. I know, for instance, for our school, we have we're supposed to have 3 representatives from the coalition, but 2 of them work for PPS. So we really only have 1, and that is our native family speaker. And she's been running around trying to get everybody informed about the situation where one of the representative is a parent at the school, but she's also an admin. So I feel like we kind of in a lost situation in that sense, where we're supposed to have 3, but we end up with 1 person that is speaking, that is willing to talk about the proposal and what we can do about it.
I would also like to say that there are low numbers of people from a lot of schools, so it's not just that school.
Yes, thank you for that. And Logan, do you want to talk about how you ended up on the Southeast Guiding Coalition and what that looks like? I saw a couple of questions about talking to staff members about staff member input and and their involvement. So if you want to explain from the teacher perspective what that looks like.
And
Yeah,
I'm just
as a
going to
teacher,
Logan, I'm sorry. I'm just going to jump in really quickly and say I'm going to close this slide here so we can see each other a little bit better. I don't think this is adding value to take up this real estate. Go ahead.
as a teacher, I actually knew nothing about this process until it was brought to my attention over the summer. And I honestly don't remember how I heard about it. But Harrison Park, where my child goes, is actually where I got the information from. And so I applied as a parent. And I'm not actually a parent, I'm a guardian, but that's the word that's on everything. So I applied as a parent. And as far as I know, there was no outreach to teachers in most schools.
Okay. Noted.
Also, I want to add, when I asked my principal on how he's reaching out to our Chinese speaking families, he asked back me how I was, me as a parent, reaching out to the Chinese families and methods that I've been doing, reaching out when it should be his job to make sure our community knows about what's going on.
I do know that there are principals in the Southeast Guiding Coalition, and the ones who are there have been, communicating with their PTAs and with their and with their communities, and some of them even have held, various informational nights. And I think that's how I think we have a lot of parents here that probably were part of those or heard about it that way. And so we do appreciate, those of you who are here because of that. We'll be looking through the chat a little bit, looking at questions there. Does anyone have any other comments around, or ideas to share kind of around the program goes? Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm in the Glencoe School District, and I think that many of the people in the Glencoe School District were really surprised by the final proposal. I think that there was a general understanding that it would not be impacting Glencoe students, and then just in the last couple of days, just a flurry of information has come out. And I think that, I'm sure this has been mentioned before, the fact that I mean, this is kind of, I don't know, nerdy of me, but I went back and watched the past guiding coalitions because I hadn't heard about it. I didn't watch them in detail, but I watched a lot of it. And it seemed like there wasn't really at least an explicit discussion about how a huge impact of this proposal would have on students, parents that are not represented in the decision making, which seems just really at odds with consensus coalition building and well-informed models. And so I found that a little odd and not really how this should work. And then the other piece, kind of to tag along to comments about the language immersion, I just also want to throw my hat in what I think, to a parent at least, the benefit of having language immersion dispersed among schools. And specifically in this model, I found it, not necessarily well balanced to move out an entire school like Glencoe from the Franklin feeder, as a Franklin feeder school, and then also bring in many students who would be in the standalone language immersion schools, where we know the benefits of neighborhood schools. And kind of, while language immersion surely should be prioritized and invested in, I don't think it should be at the expense of parents who choose to go kind of the neighborhood district route, as opposed to choosing a focus or a language immersion that is unlikely to necessarily always be right, in your neighborhood, but hopefully close by.
Thank you. And I did see a couple of questions around the timeline and when those will be implemented. And so The most immediate one would be in effect for next school year for just the Kellogg Middle School boundary itself. Any other changes, boundary changes, anything like that that are talked about aren't under consideration until 2022. And so right now that focus is for next school year, just for the Kellogg Middle School boundary changes, not any of the other ones for next school year. And Sean, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple quick points. Number one, I totally get that this new cool school is opening up, and Madison is as well, and it looks like it's going to be a beautiful new high school. But one of the things that we're seeing right now is all of our schools are closed. So, you know, a new school opening, I don't think that should be a driver for accelerating or maintaining the current velocity. You know, I put in the chat, just everything that what we heard in the preface for this meeting was things are complicated. And it seems like in just these focus groups over the last few nights that, you know, the scope, even with this effort, has expanded a little bit to kind of get into rebounding as well, which was not part of the original scope. And then on top of that, you have COVID, and then you have, you know, having to homeschool, and then you have access, you know, and the equity issue around that. I mean, how many parents can't join this meeting tonight because they don't have the wherewithal or the ability or the time, and so their voices can't be heard. And the second thing is the number one issue why our kids aren't in school right now is health and public safety, and an increasing part of that health is mental health. And we were told just the other night by one of, you know, a school counselor that mental health is the number one priority, even over school. He's like, if your kid's failing, but they're okay, that's what's important. And the strain right now that everybody is dealing with and the impacts to mental health, and then this on top of it, in terms of, you know, people have made investments years ago where they're going to live under certain assumptions. And there's been very little time to kind of take this input in, become part of the process, and see if their feedback and input can be a constructive part of the conversation. And the velocity that we're going at right now, just it you know, you want, PPS is saying they want to listen, but it doesn't seem like they're hearing. And so you know, I appreciate all these focus groups and the engagement right now. You know, we did not, a week ago, we were not engaged. A week ago, we are now fully engaged. And I think, you know, Glencoe and all the other programs, you have all these successful programs. Why is PPS not looking at successful programs and extending the programmatic success that you see across the district? So those are just some thoughts. So thank you for letting me talk.
No, thank you, Sean. And that is, you know, inclusion of parents and guardians and families that aren't represented here tonight or in other parts. That has been something that has been discussed greatly in the Southeast Guiding Coalition. And I also want to, you know, I live, you know, in the Glencoe feeder, Mount Tabor feeder and all that. And I, you know, supervise elementary schools in this area, Glencoe being one of them. And so I hear where you're coming from. And one thing that I see kind of through the chat and through some of the comments is a need, and we'll be sure, Jed and I'll be sure that this is communicated of, you know, a timeline of when the district, you know, if things are decided, when that impacts and who it impacts and when it impacts. So, you know, are we taking kids out of a high school their sophomore year and putting them somewhere else, or, you know, all those types of questions that people, that parents have that impact students, you know, success and well-being and identity, you know, especially high school being important. We will definitely ensure that that gets lifted up and it is communicated so that can be clear to everyone. Sean, did you have a follow-up comment before I call on Illy?
No, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Cool. Ellie, go ahead. Or yeah.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Ellie with Marysville School, and I'm really hoping that PPS doesn't make their decision based on which parents are speaking out, because we need to be thinking of the students that are from the lower SES schools, the schools that are more poor and less white. Those students are not going to have parents here speaking out for them and advocating for them. And if we are going to focus on equity, I believe we all have a responsibility to be speaking out and advocating for all kids, not just our own kids and not just our own schools.
Making noise up here. I've asked him not to. You either need to.
What do you mean he's making noise?
He's talking.
Levi?
Yeah.
What's wrong with him talking?
It's Lou's light out.
Oh, Levi, come downstairs.
Oh, I think Karen, you're unmuted.
Yeah, and I think I need to be made a co-host.
Oh, again, did it
Again.
change? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I thought that's how you were controlling everything, Jed. Let's see, sorry, my computer is really slow for some reason with everything. But Ellie, yes, those also are conversations that are being had, and I agree with you. You know, I was a principal for 5 years in a large urban district and served schools that were 97 to 100% historically underserved schools. So I understand that importance and the difficulty, but importance of engaging families, you know, at all levels. And we'll be sure that your comments are lifted up as well. Thank you.
Stephen, I just wanted to share a resource for folks if they're unaware of. During this process, we did do a phone survey of parents and guardians, and we really did our best to reach out to families of colors specifically, and we were able to reach of the parents that we were able to do the phone surveys with, almost 50% of them were families of color. So that information, including their verbatim responses to questions about this process, are available. I believe it's on the, I want to say the November 5th packet if you go to the enrollment and program balancing. I think there's a lot of really valuable information in there.
Yes, thank you for that, Jed. And that's also, you know, we have the different rooms, and, you know, part of it is, you know, there is a level of privilege of being able to access a Zoom meeting, you know, in the evening, but at the same time, there's also a level of open access that, you know, maybe, you know, we have 800 people viewing the live stream versus if this were an in-person event, maybe not as many people would have come. So there is a trade-off, but I think that the Southeast Guided Coalition has that as a priority to engage all stakeholders and at all levels. And so that will continue to be a charge forward. Ella, did you have something else to comment on that, or can I move on to Deb? Or I think Deb was next, yeah.
I would just add that I don't think those parents are going to take the time to fill out the survey. So I don't know if you should wait for them to even respond. I think we all know, you know, what we want. You know, for them to be able to go to their neighborhood school is what's best for them. And we should just keep that in mind, that they might not be filling out the survey and advocating for their kids. So we shouldn't wait for them to be speaking out about it.
Thank you. All right, Deb, would you like to go? And then after Deb, we'll do Rupa and then Ron.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that I keep hearing over and over and over again, I'm a Mount Tabor mom who came up through Glencoe and lives a stone's throw from Franklin, and I have twin 8th graders. So that's my context. But I think the thing that keeps coming up over and over again is that people didn't know this was going on. And because the headlines were always about Kellogg opening. And that was like sort of it. And so, you know, I represent a group of very, very involved parents. And last Thursday, I think when we found out that the final proposal had our kids going to a school, you know, relatively far from our house, everybody kind of was up in arms and freaking out that they didn't know about it. And so it seems a little just suspect and completely the opposite of transparent. And then you mentioned the survey, and I saw the survey results that 50% of people surveyed, there were, I think, 320 people or something like that surveyed over the phone. And 50% of them had some inkling that something was going on, but the questioning on the survey was so unspecific that had you asked a question like, are you aware of the proposal, the final proposal that's in front, I think you would have had zero impact. Or zero yeses. So it just feels like I mentioned before earlier in the chat as well, that it feels like phase 2, what happens in phase 2 depends greatly on what happens in phase 1 and vice versa. So you've got to have everybody who's impacted at the table, and they were not. Nobody from Glencoe Elementary was on the coalition. The 2 parents from Mount Tabor that were on the coalition both came up through Atkinson, which is a very different outcome than, and so it's easy for people who aren't at the table to make decisions for people who, it's easy for people who are at the table to make decisions for people who aren't. And so it just feels like a very lacking in transparency process. And I agree with everyone that it feels rushed, and it also feels like a really horrible time for everybody's mental well-being to push this through in the times that we're in right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Deb. And, to address that, as I'll say, as being a resident, and zone to Glencoe, I did, notice once the proposal was out there, I saw chatter on the apps and things like that about, the surprise as well. And I think that, there was a timeline, and then once, the guiding coalition heard about this, they're involving more people, but we'll be sure to lift up the concern and the issue of the rushed feeling of that and the lack of inclusiveness of voices and a timeline. And so we'll be sure to note that as well, because that's important to note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rupa?
Yeah, I just have a question. So why are middle schools all going to a specific high school? Like if you're at Mount Tabor and you live close to Franklin, why can't you be going to Franklin if you live in that neighborhood? Like, why can't you split out Mount Tabor Middle School based on where people live? Because that's where our kids are commuting from, right? They don't live at Mount Tabor Middle School. They live at our house.
Right. That's a good question. And we'll be sure to note that down. I know there's, having, just personally been a middle school and a high school principal, there's, pros and cons to, the kids you hang out with in your neighborhood versus the kids that you're doing team sports with or clubs with or activities with at school, and, and how those networks are. So I think that we'll be sure to put that question in there to see, what considerations and responses we can provide to that. So thank you.
I think that my primary point would be the transportation, right? You're going from walking to having to find a bus or drive a car, or, that's a significant commute issue for all of us that live close to these high schools.
Right. I saw someone in the chat mention that they could walk to the park to get to Franklin, but they would be going instead to Madison. Thank you. All right. And I think, let's see, so we have 3 more people with their hand up. I think Ellie, Ingrid, and Ron, but there was Ron first. I don't know if it's keeping people in order or not. So if I said Ron's name first, and Ron, you can go. If not, we can go Ellie, Ingrid, then Ron.
I don't need my hand raised anymore.
Okay, cool.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to check in on what the procedures are going to be moving forward, specifically for making sure that teachers and community members from Lent, not speaking for Lent, but being a community member of the Lent neighborhood, as well as a teacher at Lent for the last 9 years. I'm curious what we're going to do going forward to get the Lent voice heard. Because I heard you said that you're going to uplift these voices. I'm just curious what the plan is to make sure that that does happen.
Right, and so we'll note we'll note that for sure. Also, I would say to since you are a teacher also there, but if a family member, any parent here, anyone tonight, For Lent, you can contact Mr. Smith, and he's the principal of Lent, for those of you who aren't familiar with Lent. And you talk to him about that because he's also on the coalition, and he can bring that voice in. But I'll be sure, or Jed and I will be sure that it is communicated how.
And I heard that, and I appreciate that, but I'm wondering what specific procedures going forward that we're going to do to make sure that the Lent teachers and the Lent community is heard. I understand that we can reach out to Mr. Smith, and I heard you say a few times that you're going to talk about and uplift it. I'm just curious how we're going to make sure that actually happens.
And we'll record that. And I just want to clarify, my role here as facilitator to capture, comments and questions such as yours, Ron, and we appreciate that. I don't, unfortunately, have the answers to those questions. Those are there's a larger group at designing this process, and I'm a part of this process facilitating this group. So but Jed has recorded your question, and I will and we'll be sure to have that written down and shared.
And I appreciate your honesty. I just want to make sure that it's, stated, underlined, whatever, because we're talking about a community and a school that historically and ongoing has been systemically oppressed from a variety of levels. And, one of the proposals that's been put out specifically about Lent is very concerning for all of us that are at Lent and live in the Lent neighborhood and are aware of what's being talked about.
I appreciate that, Ron. Thank you. All right. I think Deb and Ingrid's hands are probably down. If Ingrid's hand isn't, I think maybe Kay Anderson, we haven't heard.
I would like to speak if that's all right. This is Ingrid.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I wasn't sure. There you go. Go for it. We'll do Ingrid, Kay Anderson, and then I see if Karen's hand is up. So if that's up still, we'll have that. Go ahead.
All right. This is Ingrid once again with kids at Franklin, Mount Tabor, and Atkinson. I believe some of the reason a lot of these parents are sort of up in arms is because we were initially told this was all about Kellogg opening and basically skimming middle school students from the K-8s to get them into Kellogg. And so everybody was under the impression that this would not affect the elementary schools at all. So as several people have noted, we're in a pandemic. There's a lot going on. These are drastic changes. There's no need to be doing anything with the elementary schools right now. We can make changes specifically to get Kellogg filled without affecting any of these elementary schools. And I think it's very concerning right now that this proposal, scenario 10, Lentz would lose their entire neighborhood school. Bridger would lose their entire neighborhood school. Creative Science School will not have a location as far as we know right now. Those are massive changes and massive stress inducers for all the families in this district, and none of it needs to be addressed. We should just be looking at what kids need to move from K-8s to fill up Kellogg. And no boundary changes, no changes at all need to be made at the elementary school level. So I am begging the Portland Public School Board to reconsider taking a step back and do just what they need to do to get kids into Kellogg and leave the elementary school kids alone for the moment so that we can take more time to decide really what the parents want and how changes should be made to the elementary schools and not do it in this rushed manner that is causing a lot of stress during an already stressful time.
Thank you, Ingrid, for that. And that is noted. Karen, did you have some of the hands stay lingered up, but I did see Karen, Ron, and
Yeah, this is Karen, and sorry if I was unmuted and talking before, but I wanted to ask a question that I saw in the comments and see if it could be answered. Is moving forward with phase 1 going to somehow kind of make lines in the sand that will have to have the ripple effects of, the impacts we talked about on the ones that aren't going to be voted on now, like Glencoe changing, like, are there going to be impacts on enrollment and, whatnot that will require next steps to fall in place?
So I guess I need to clarify. Is your question, obviously, kind of related to, the previous question of, there are, decisions about Kellogg to fill Kellogg that have to be made, but will some of those outcomes have implications for other schools like Glencoe? Obviously, they're going to happen in the future, possibly for 2022. Is that sort of your question?
Yes, basically, because I think a lot of people have talked about the concern about input and transparency and pace of this process. And I appreciate that there's some need to move forward on the phase one of the process, but I'm wondering if moving forward on phase one will require the other kind of next steps that have been anticipated to happen. They'll have to happen. Does my question make sense?
Yeah, I think that, from this process, the committee, the Southeast Guiding Coalition, and the organizers have learned a lot for sure, and that there obviously will be implications, and the lessons learned and comments received here will inform future planning for the next phase. For a lot of the comments and concerns and questions that everybody brings up here, I think without a doubt that is something that will happen, from considerations of timeline, how to include parents, and how to start that process off. So there aren't comments around there being a veil of secrecy or lack of transparency, and to make sure that those are priorities from the get-go, so no one feels that way, and that it's inclusive from the start. And I think that all of those type of comments are productive and will be used to, for the following decisions and coalitions that are put out there. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Sorry, so are you saying they might start over the whole process?
No, I'm not saying they'll start over, but I'm just saying that, with the continue, there's gonna be more conversations for later phases, is what I'm saying. And so the only phase that we're talking about right now is I'm talking about for the larger 2022 implications and boundary adjustments. There'll be different phases, and so for that phase one, it's for the decision for implementation for Kellogg is 2021. And so that's about, that pink box. Really, everything else is still with conversations still happening around that. And so if you look back to the slides, the Harrison Park and Kellogg feeders, that is the one that's in particular being discussed.
Okay.
Hey, Stephen, I just want to jump in really quick, and I want to let the next person talk here, but I think that what the coalition hears here tonight could certainly lead them to, consider impacts. What are the minimum impacts, right? And what are impacts that are, I think, more forward thinking to phase two, and how to balance that based on what they're hearing here. So I think that they do have, there are a set of decisions that can be made there with respect to, those pieces. Is it just about Kellogg, or is it about thinking further along the line with respect to the work that will be done in phase two? I don't know that helped. I'm sorry if it didn't.
No, it helped. Thank you for that.
And, I didn't mean to say no, it won't start over. I mean, well, what's being said here tonight impact the decision brought forward to the board? Absolutely. That's why everyone's here. And so while I'm going to be a complete start over from the infancy, all this here is going to have will have a major shift likely on the direction and conversations after everything is decoded and themed on how the Guiding Coalition moves forward, because there's no way that it couldn't. And so I hope that provides some reassurance there as we watch this process go forward. So Bonnie, you've had your hand raised for a minute, so I'll let you go.
Oh, yeah. Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about how this proposal is going to benefit our historically underserved families. I feel like there's a lot of talk about equity and that consideration, and I'd like to know how that's going to look once it's sort of in action. And yeah, thank you.
Yes, I can't speak specifically to that. I mean, that's obviously a large question around equity and social justice. That's definitely in the Portland Public Schools theory of action, and it is guiding a lot of the talk.
Stephen,
yes.
Could I just ask if maybe one of the coalition members wants to maybe talk about how they've been considering the proposals along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely.
Logan, are you out there?
I saw Shayla in here earlier too.
We have Sheila, Min, and Alexandra as well.
Oh yeah, so whoever wants to, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but I think you guys could add a lot of context.
I'm not sure I heard your whole question, Bonnie. This is Alexandra, but I will talk to you a little bit because I think equity has been a big role. And I know for a lot of the parents, especially in my small group, leaving PPS as it is with feeder paths and boundary, the equity isn't at a good point in a lot of schools. And so there's only so much of that we can relieve, right, without busing kids to different areas. With what's being presented, there are some ideas of equity switching, like the switch of Mount Tabor to Madison, having a little more balance that way and diversity within that school on socioeconomic status for sure. There's been different talks in different areas, but really it's getting into the weeds. We have been provided with so much data, and that's something that everybody is looking at on their own free time in different ways. And then when we do come together, there's so much information we're trying to go over that it's something that needs to be explored much deeper in many different ways. You know, as we've all talked about here, this has been a rush process, but I feel like equity, especially for the groups I've been a part of in outer Southeast, there's been a lot of talk to that and about focusing those historically underserved students and what making academic experiences equitable for them.
And I can appreciate that conversation. I guess I'm just wondering what that's going to look like in practice.
And Stephen, I'm just noticing that Jessica has had her hand up, her physical hand up for quite a while here. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Well, yes. So Bonnie, yes, we will, be sure that that point is brought across to the designers of the Southeast Guiding Coalition, and that's brought up. And Jessica, yes, I see that your hand, I wasn't sure if you were frozen or if that hand was up. So sorry for that. You were on my second page, but go ahead, Jessica.
Hi, I wanted to talk about the Creative Science School and kind of touch on a conversation that happened earlier about like why we're touching the elementary schools. It seems like such an abrupt thing to do, to rip these like elementary school kids out of the school that they know and place them in another school. I mean, I love that Creative Science School is a K-8, but if it had to change to a K-5 and then, those kids were transferred over, that would make more sense to me. And then this might just be ignorant, but why does this have to happen so quickly? Like, if we have to redistrict things, like, why don't we keep the kids where they are in the programs that they have and then start enrolling differently starting at the bottom up, like kindergarten, that redistricting happens at kindergarten. I know that's a slower process, but for our kids, that's what's best for them. So that's my question.
Thank you. And of course, like I said, I don't have all, the answers, but that question is recorded, and I think it will be one that is a FAQ type question that we've heard before. Jeff, I see your hand up. We're right next to Jessica on my screen.
So I was on some of the early coalition meetings, and I'm over in Buckman, which is more towards the northwestern quadrant of Southeast, and we're an arts immersion school, so half the parents lottery in. We also have kids that are special needs in their behavioral, and they are school within a school. So we kind of see things on a flip side where, and I'm on the PTA, at the beginning of the year, we saw the phenomenon of a school within a school. This is kind of, I'm speaking on a really big, broad subject, but my own experience as well. And we saw the exclusion of those kids. And so the goal this last year with the PTA was to bring those parents and those kids and those teachers into the school and not have them feel like they're in a separate wing of the school, because they literally were, and get those kids in the classrooms and do kind of a push-in scenario where those kids were more active in all the arts that we were doing. And it was a beautiful thing. And I think some of the schools with language immersion do that. Atkinson is a sister school that we do our auction with them, and they do their auction with us. And that program there, I think, is really successful because of the push-in nature of it, and that everybody gets involved, even though it's only some of the kids are involved with the Spanish immersion. It becomes a culture of the whole school. And I think that was kind of an important thing. But speaking to like kind of the work that we're doing here, so Flow was brought in, as far as I understand, because when they tried to do this scenario a couple of years back, it became kind of, the district doesn't have enough resources and the right resources to crunch the numbers, and to try and get your head wrapped around trying to get the schools balanced so that everybody has resources in the right ways was a really tough thing. And so, and when I say that, I say that if you start having schools that don't have enough teachers or enough students, you can't have enough teachers. And then you start to lose things like an art class or PE, or just having enough support faculty to make the school run. And you see classrooms where the balance becomes really offset, where you have these crazy classes of 35 to 40 students, and there's only one teacher, and it's only one grade, and that just doesn't work. And so part of this exercise is to make sure that we have across the board kind of equitable sizes of classrooms so that you can have enough teachers to address all the students at the right level. And kind of along those same lines is that if you don't do that, then you have these off-balance schools where they're really small schools and they just don't have the kind of resources like shop classes or art classes or anything. They have the basics and that's it. And they don't have enough of the extra capacity to supply those other things. So part of our job is to try and figure out that whole thing. Part of Flow's reason of being here is we have this pretty big group of high schoolers that are going to come through, and they're going to fill up the high schools. And some of the high schools, I know like Cleveland is really full. And when those guys go through, it's going to taper back off, and then you're stuck with a school that has just not enough students to support those resources. So that's kind of what the coalition has been looking at. That's my bird's eye. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you for that, Jeff. No, we appreciate that. And if there are any other guiding coalition members in here that want to speak to that as well, feel free to do that. I do see a few more hands raised up top. I know that some of you have commented already, and I know the hand raising feature sometimes delayed, but from Bonnie, Ingrid, Kay, or Karen, did you have more questions?
This is Kristen Anderson.
Sorry, Kristen.
No, that's all right. I just have my initial up there. I just wanted to make a comment about the goals versus the process. And, you know, the goals are very bold, and especially the equity goal is a bold and a very good goal, right? But it doesn't feel clear to me as a participant, and I think to most participants, what the criteria actually are. What is it that you're looking at to determine what would be successful? And how can the rest of us look at those things? Because I think what happens when we don't have more information about what the actual criteria are that help you meet a goal is that it's keeping the community from being able to come up with creative solutions. Because I think a lot of people feel like they're in a black box. And so I would really encourage PPS to be much more clear. And I do think time would be helpful because there's this whole big community that cares, and there are potentially more creative solutions out there. But from my perspective as a community member, it's really hard to be creative because it's unclear what that means, how you're defining how you would reach these goals.
Thank you for that. And it's become clear, you know, through this process that there are a few themes that have emerged and that the team will take back. And we do have 2 minutes before 8, but Amy does have her hand up. So Amy, would you like to speak?
Hi, hang on a second. I'm just gonna start my video.
Good.
I had a question about busing. I was just, my kid is DLI at Bridger, and sorry, I'm trying to shut off the chat. It's really distracting. And I was just wondering if there was busing intended for DLI students that don't live in the neighborhood that go to Lentz per se then, because it's pretty far from us, and say for Woodstock DLI that then go to Bridger. Like, is that part of the plan? Because that makes it really hard for parents to get kids. And for me personally, it would mean like I'd have to quit my job in order to make that happen. So, and I know for a lot of other parents, it creates problems. So is there any plans for that?
I am unsure about the answer to that question, but we will pass that up.
I think it would contribute to withdrawal. So that's one thing that, I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to sending my kid to Lentz for a full DLI program, but if I can't have busing, it would make it very difficult. And I think that a lot of people are in that boat. So yeah, I would appreciate you passing that on.
Yes, thank you. I think transportation and busing and all that is a huge topic. So,
Well, and can I speak
ahead.
to
Yep.
Amy for a moment? Just
Absolutely.
to help you out in this coalition process, because that busing and transportation for choice option schools has been talked about a lot. And the current, I would say the current limit is 1 mile away from the school. They provide busing on the elementary level. And so I can tell you currently right now at Marysville, there are buses that pick up kids to go to the Bridger Spanish program. At the Holgate Library, 3 blocks from Marysville, there are buses that pick up kids that are part of the Woodstock Mandarin program. So just that's already in play that they provide buses for those programs if their homes are more than 1 mile from the school. I don't know if that helps at all.
I mean, as long as it would continue the other way, it would certainly help in my situation. And I think it could help other people too. I mean, I would hope.
Yeah, I just wanted to share the information I know about that on how it's currently working and the limited information we have been told. I think that's going to have to be ironed out by the district once everything is settled.
I definitely think it would make people more confident in being able to make changes if they knew that transportation was taken care of as well. So,
yeah, I think rational thinking, I totally agree with you on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I don't think the intent is to make it harder on anyone. And so I think that will be that's something that has to be addressed for sure. So thank you. Well, it is 8:01 and we are ending at 8, but if you want to record anything else in the chat or say anything, you can also go to the PPS enrollment and balancing website to continue to submit comments. Of course, you can also email us or Claire Hertz, whose name is on the webpage there. That's an option, or however you want your voice heard. That is your choice. But we appreciate you spending your evening with us this Thursday. I want to thank Logan and Jed there, and everyone else here who participated, and even if you just listen, because that's participating as well. And we hope that you have a great evening. And if there is no further comments, I think I do see Maggie with her hand raised. So, but Maggie, if you want to go ahead.
I was wondering, is there going to be a copy of these different various breakout rooms and chat transcripts available for everybody?
Great question. The answer to that is yes. And they're going to be putting chat transcripts, compiling that, and all the recordings on that PPS enrollment and balancing website. I'm not sure what the turnaround time is for them on that, but they seem to get it done pretty quickly. And thank you for that question. Any other clarifying questions before we end this meeting?
Stephen, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I know this is a really difficult process, and this was this is just a lot of really respectful comments. So I appreciate that. And I just really want to encourage folks to please fill out the survey. That's going to be categorized and shared with the Guiding Coalition. And I feel it's just a really good way to be able to get your concerns and questions across. And that also we'll be looking for, some of these questions that we heard quite a few times to put together an FAQ. And we will be looking at every one of the questions here that we were unable to answer tonight to get questions answered on that. So again, just thank you and for your time and for your understanding on this process.
Jed, could you put the link to the survey in the chat? Oh, thanks.
All over it, Logan. Thank you so much.
And then with that, everybody have a great evening.
Stephen, I'm just going to give folks a little bit longer here to get out of the Zoom room.
It was the open house survey, right? That's what folks were wanting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You nailed it. Yeah, that was the one. That was the one I was trying to plug anyway. All right. I'm just gonna go ahead and.
Jed.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I just wanted to. Sorry, I'm just gonna remove the last few people here, and maybe we can have just a quick little debrief.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And let's just remove that one. We might be finding our room. I'm not sure what Otis is. I'm afraid to kick it out.
Office of Technology and
Gotcha.
Information
Yeah,
Services.
got it. Afraid to chuck that out.